Welcome to the Inner Light Companion, a space to personalize your spiritual journey with the 12 sacred intimacies. I'm Tamara Ridge, your companion and guide. Each episode of this podcast explores a facet of connection with the divine, yourself, others, and the world, offering clear markers to recognize, gentle practices to try, and stories that help you grow what's strong and tend to what needs to grow. Move at your pace and use the name for the holy that fits your heart. This isn't therapy or advice. It's a meeting of souls, a place to listen deeply, ask real questions, and remember the wisdom already within you. I invite you now to take a breath. Let's begin. How did a former Mormon therapist end up teaching ancient yogic wisdom? Today I'm sharing my spiritual heritage story, how I inherited original teachings from a master who changed millions of lives, and why I believe that you don't need anyone's permission to access divine truth. So at 53, after my third divorce, I was on a spiritual dating app. I know, called Spiritual Singles. I wasn't really expecting much. Honestly, I'd started to believe that there was nobody out there for me. Then I got a message from a man. He said, I read your profile, and I think we could be each other's cup of tea. Please look at my profile and let me know if you'd like to connect. So I went to his profile, of course, thinking I was going to find another person who said they were spiritual with no foundation to that, no substance. But I read his profile. It was beautifully written. It described the ideal man that I didn't think existed. So I reached out and we talked on the phone for 2 hours the first time. And let me tell you, during that phone call, I felt something I never felt before. And that was a true divine masculine presence. I felt his strength and I felt the safety to be seen exactly as I was, maybe for the first time in my life. So when I hung up, I just wanted to cry. Not because I was in love, not because I was sad to hang up the phone after 2 hours, but because something in me recognized that being truly seen was even possible. Over the next few days, he and I talked at length about his spiritual path. He'd been studying the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda since he was 15, beginning with the autobiography of a yogi. But the way he talked about spirituality, about God, about meditation, it caused this burning sensation in my heart physically. It was a heat that I couldn't ignore. Impossible to ignore, really. So I ordered the book immediately. And the day it arrived, I remember I came rushing home because Amazon told me that it was waiting for me. And I skipped all of my evening routine and I sat down and read for 90 minutes straight. And much of that 90 minutes, I had tears rolling down my cheeks. And what was burning in my heart was this. It was the truth that personal contact with God can be attained through meditation, not through a church, not through an authority figure, but directly, personally, through practice. So I scheduled a visit to the Self-Realization Fellowship Temple in Glendale that same week. And by September, this man and I had been together for several months. And I'd been driving about 45 minutes one way on weekends to be with him. His father was declining, starting in hospice care, and I helped arrange the care. By that time, I knew that his father had been a direct disciple of Yogananda. He had lived with him on Mount Washington in the 1950s. He had received the original teachings and Kriya Yoga initiation directly from Yogananda himself. And he'd carried those teachings his entire life. One night in September, my guy spoke to me on the phone for about 30 minutes. I really didn't talk. And at that time, it was probably the first time that anyone told me it was okay to slow down, to listen to my body, to heal. He said, if it takes a year to get your groups going, that's okay. Then he said, I more than love you, and hung up. The next morning, those words, I more than love you, struck me to my core. I lay in bed and I said out loud, I'm not alone anymore. And a lifetime of sorrow spilled out of me. I cried hard for about 5 minutes. Hard crying. Tears of gratitude and long grief. But within 6 months of meeting this man and his father, who was a lifetime devotee of Paramahansa Yogananda, I received Kriya Yoga initiation. The same practice his father had received directly from Yogananda. I was brought into the lineage. I inherited the original teachings of Yogananda, unedited and unfiltered, as a living spiritual transmission passed from master to disciple to family to me. Over the next 2 years, his son and I cared for this man together in hospice. And during that time, I learned not just from the teachings on the page, but from watching a man who had lived those teachings for over 70 years. I witnessed what a lifetime of devotion, practice, and direct connection with God looked like in a human body, even as that body was preparing to leave. I wrote in my journal on December 31st, 2019. I came from a background of so much trauma and pain. I've lived in panic and turmoil my entire life. Looking back, I can see that God moved people out of my life. After my third husband left, I doubted my ability to make good relationship choices. I had no faith that my consistent efforts to improve myself could ever lead to a coupling that would work for me. I began to believe that there was no one out there for me. Then in June, I met this man. I recognized him as I heard his voice in our first phone call. I recognized his voice, and I told him so. I told him that I knew him from a previous lifetime. A bold statement, but I thought, what do I have to lose? He'll either see it or he won't. But this was the first human I've ever met who loves God and truly puts God first. The first person whose life bears the fruit of his spiritual journey. Through him, I became acquainted with Yogananda and then Kriya Yoga meditation within 6 months of meeting him. My life has continued to open up. It feels like an explosion of blessings and a more clear conduit to God. So much healing. It's miraculous. My life will never be the same. That's the end of the journal entry. That inheritance, those teachings, that initiation. Those 2 years caring for a living example of the path became the foundation of my reconstruction. After 10 years in spiritual darkness following my exit from Mormonism, I finally had a path, a practice, and direct access to God without a gatekeeper. So I want to give you some more background because it's really important here. Yogananda had another direct disciple who lived with him for years. So from 1948 to 1962. His name was Don Walters, and his name was changed living with Yogananda to Swami Kriyananda. He founded the Ananda spiritual community in 1968. And he, of course, as he had a right to, wanted to use Yogananda's teachings to serve the Ananda members. But the Self-Realization Fellowship, which was Yogananda's original organization, sued him in 1990 to stop him from using Yogananda's teachings and Yogananda's name and Yogananda's likeness. What happened after that was a massive legal battle that went from 1990 to 2002, one of the most significant religious freedom cases in American history. The SRF hired Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, which is one of the world's largest law firms at the time. And the plan was to put Ananda out of business, quote unquote. Ananda defended with a single attorney, John Parsons. So, as I said before, the SRF claimed exclusive rights to the term self-realization and all variants of that term, Paramahansa Yogananda's name, however it was spelled, and all images, photos, voice recordings, and likenesses of Yogananda. They also had copyrights to Yogananda's writings, lectures, and teachings. They wanted the right to determine who could represent or share Yogananda's teachings. But in April 1992, the court ruled that self-realization is a generic term that cannot be trademarked. They identified it as the ultimate goal of traditional Hindu yoga teaching. It's a spiritual concept that predates any modern organization by millennia, if you believe the world is that old. Generic religious terms describing spiritual paths cannot be monopolized. What they decided about Yogananda's name is that SRF could not trademark Paramahansa Yogananda's name. They also determined that many of Yogananda's most important works were public domain. This means that early editions of the autobiography of a yogi, articles, poems, and prayers that were published between 1920 and 1942, and many of the photographs of Yogananda were now public domain. The judge also canceled the Self-Realization Fellowship's trademark registrations and ordered the U.S. Patent Office to remove them. The final outcome of this huge, massive 12-year lawsuit was that Ananda won 95% of the legal rulings. The Self-Realization Fellowship sought $33 million in damages. And SRF was awarded less than $29,000. That's less than 0.1% of what they sought for a few audio recordings. With this landmark case, the court established that anyone can freely use the term self-realization and the name Paramahansa Yogananda. It also determined that Yogananda's teachings belong to all sincere seekers, not to one institution. Why this matters is that you do not need institutional permission to access divine truth. Spiritual teachings aren't owned by religious authorities. And religious freedom includes the right to share and practice spiritual teachings without gatekeeping. This legal precedent gave people like me permission to teach from these teachings. It's also significant because it really kind of shows us that leaving institutions that claim exclusive access to God is at least legally supported. I know we don't talk about that much in the post-Mormon circles or in the spiritual but not religious communities, but nobody can claim exclusive access. And the truth is, no one organization can own a spiritual teacher's legacy. The court spent 12 years answering this question, and their verdict was clear. Wisdom belongs to seekers, not gatekeepers. So if you've ever been told that you're not qualified or not ordained or not authorized to have direct relationship with God, at least this lawsuit says otherwise. The courts agreed after 12 years of litigation. Wisdom doesn't belong to gatekeepers. It belongs to you. It belongs to all sincere, truth-seeking souls. Inside joke, whether or not you pay a full tithing. Doesn't matter. It's not what this is about. But, the whole gatekeeping issue is really about the mammoth piles of money that these organizations make when they're the gatekeepers. I've already told you in previous episodes that I left the church when I was 43. I'm 59 today. I had so many authentic spiritual experiences since childhood that made me a spirituality first kind of person. But at 43, I realized after a lifetime of events that didn't match my direct divine encounters that it was time for me to walk away from everything I've been taught. And then I had a 10-year dark night of the soul. So from the time I was 43 until I was 53, I searched. I tried to find spiritual community. I tried to find where the truth is. I looked for someone to teach me. It was really a spiritual void, and I felt profoundly isolated. I tried to reach out to different communities, but nothing fit. And everything left a "you're not good enough" taste in my mouth. So I had to start understanding everything from the beginning, including my worth and how I saw myself, based on spiritual teaching that still had to be deconstructed. The thing I didn't realize is that I didn't know what I believed when I removed the Mormon framework. I felt totally outside of the reach of the divine. But this partner I told you about introduced me to the autobiography of a yogi, and that book opened a door I didn't know existed. A way to understand spirituality that honored both my inner experiences and a living tradition. I remember the first time I sat on the floor and tried meditation. I was alone in my apartment, and I'd been reading about meditation, and so I thought I'd just sit and try. And I remember being filled with so much sense of love and sense of being accepted and whole, and that this was my right path, that meditation was my right path. So from that moment, I knew I wanted to continue. And even at that point in time, I realized that even if my partner didn't see me as I saw him, at least he introduced me to this, the thing I'd been searching for. But I did want more. So I'm an intellectual, and my thirst for deeper knowledge and real healing led me to reading Yogananda's massive 2-volume work, The Second Coming of Christ, which is his commentary on the teachings of Jesus. What I loved about this and all of the early morning readings that I did is that it helped me unravel incorrect Mormon beliefs. It showed me Jesus' teachings through yogic wisdom lenses. It gave me tools to start reconstructing authentic spiritual understanding. It's over 1,500 pages. And I just worked my way through every single page because Yogananda wove the wisdom of the sacred masters, not just Jesus or Krishna in isolation, but in this living artwork of Eastern and Western truth. And that inclusion, that unification is what kept me reading and kept me coming back. And I learned more and more in deeper levels that God is accessible directly. No middleman needed. I finally saw God and myself differently. I started seeing God as not a distant authority figure, but as an intimate divine presence. The God I knew in spite of being Mormon through my very private, frequent spiritual experiences. So I want to just say, take a second and say that if you're in deconstruction right now, feeling lost and wondering what you actually believe without your old religious framework, I want you to know reconstruction is possible, and it doesn't require joining another church. It requires finding teachers and wisdom that help you connect directly with the divine. So one of the things that drew me so deeply to Yogananda's teaching, especially in this massive work, The Second Coming of Christ, was the way he blended the teachings of the sacred masters and ancient wisdom from so many sources. He didn't just offer a new take on Christianity or reinterpretation of Jesus from a single tradition's perspective. He wove together the insights of Christ, Krishna, the whole yogic lineage, and universal spiritual truths into one living thread. That's what kept me reading and studying, not just once, but immersing myself page by page through more than 1,500 pages of the most intense, soul-searching, enlivening spiritual texts I've ever encountered. Yogananda's whole approach was inclusion, synthesis, and universal truths, never narrowing or gatekeeping what it means to know God. So when I talk about teaching the wisdom of the masters, I'm not claiming exclusive authority. I'm acknowledging both the living lineage I was initiated into and the universal approach that Yogananda embodied, drawing from the best of Eastern, Western, ancient, and modern guidance. If you've ever felt like you had to pick one tradition and throw out the rest, I want you to know my path and Yogananda's message gives you permission to gather wisdom wherever it speaks to your soul and build a spiritual practice that actually fits you. It's one of the things that makes me so excited about my 12 sacred intimacies, because it allows you to find a fit that's so unique to you. So I do need to say that I'm not an official representative of SRF, of Ananda, or of any organization. I don't give formal Kriya initiations, and I never teach techniques that require that authority. If you're drawn to initiation, I'll help you find the right organizations for you. But what I do claim is this: direct family lineage. Kriya initiation from a direct disciple of Yogananda. Years of immersive, imperfect, but persistent Kriya practice. Inheritance and study of the original teachings of Yogananda. 30 years as a therapist with an unwavering secret agenda to help people heal so they can connect with God. And most importantly, a life restructured around spiritual intimacy with the divine. I embody the householder path that Yogananda and his gurus endorsed. Spiritual growth integrated with daily life, not apart from it. My 12 Sacred Intimacies framework combines everything I've learned about intimacy with God, with self, with others, offered as a toolkit for anyone who wants to grow. Before I close, I want you to know the real story. My Kriya practice hasn't been perfect or unbroken. Life happens. Grief, resistance, not feeling good enough, busy seasons, doubt. I've wandered, I've paused, and I've doubted more than once. What matters is I've always come back. That's what the masters care about, not perfection, but returning again and again. If your practice is imperfect, if your faith or rituals ebb and flow, know this, you're still on the path. We're not supposed to be trying to be perfect. That's a false doctrine. One of the things that I love that Yogananda says is the biggest sin that we can make is believing that we sin. It's more about continuing to learn and keep trying. The universe keeps the gate open no matter how many laps it takes to come home. If any of this speaks to you, if your spiritual journey has been messy, if you've been told you need permission or authority to connect with God, this episode is your invitation. You are already welcome. My job with the Inner Light Companion podcast is to light the path, not to guard the door. If you want to go deeper, subscribe for future monthly Wisdom from the Masters episodes, or reach out and share your story. You belong here. You are never too far from the divine. The lineage is alive because we keep returning. And there's a place for you around this circle. The courts spent 12 years deciding whether spiritual wisdom could be owned by one organization. Their answer, no. Wisdom belongs to seekers, to you. And there's nothing left to prove. Thanks for listening. As you step into your day, notice which intimacy stirred for you. And then choose one small practice and let it meet you where you are. You want support? Grab the free Sacred Intimacy snapshot. And when you're ready, the full Sacred Intimacy assessment that can guide your next steps. Links are in the show notes. Until next time, walk gently, listen deeply, and trust the light within.